She never imagined that signing a piece of paper would change her life forever. What started as a mere contract, a cold agreement between two strangers, slowly unraveled into something neither of them had expected: love, passion, and a bond stronger than any written clause. But how did a contract marriage turn into the greatest love story ever told? Let's dive into this unforgettable journey. The pen hovered over the crisp white paper, her fingers trembling slightly as she hesitated. The contract lay between them like an invisible barrier, a reminder that this was not about love, dreams, or the fairy tales she had once believed in. It was business, a necessary arrangement dictated by circumstances beyond her control. Zara took a deep breath, her heart hammering as she glanced up at the man sitting across the table. Adam was composed, his expression unreadable, as though this agreement meant nothing to him. And perhaps it didn't. He was a man of logic, driven by ambition rather than emotion. To him, this marriage was a solution, a calculated decision with clear benefits for both parties. She lowered her gaze, willing herself to push aside the emotions threatening to rise within her. Feelings had no place here. This wasn't about companionship, warmth, or the kind of love she had once dreamed of. It was an arrangement, a legal document binding them for a predetermined time. No more, no less. "Are you ready?" Adam's voice broke the silence, smooth and unwavering. Zara swallowed hard. Was she ready? Could she truly step into a life where love held no meaning, where vows were spoken without devotion, and where her future was dictated by ink on paper rather than the beating of her heart? But what choice did she have? Her father's business was on the verge of collapse, and the weight of responsibility had fallen on her shoulders. Adam's proposal had come at a time when she had nowhere else to turn. Marrying him would secure her family's future, stabilize their crumbling empire, and free her from the financial storm looming over them. Adam, too, had his reasons. His grandfather's will demanded that he marry before inheriting the business empire he had worked tirelessly to expand. To him, Zara was the perfect solution, someone who understood the stakes, someone who wouldn't demand love or emotional intimacy. It was a marriage of convenience, nothing more. She exhaled slowly, gripping the pen with renewed determination. This isn't about feelings. This is about survival. With one final glance at Adam, she signed her name. The weight of the decision settled over her like an iron cloak. There was no turning back now. Adam picked up the pen and signed his own name, sealing their fate with a single stroke. He pushed the contract toward the lawyer, who nodded in acknowledgement before gathering the papers. "It's done," Adam said, his voice neutral. Zara forced a nod. "Yes, it is." The words felt heavy, final. She had just married a man she barely knew, a man who didn't love her, and one she had no right to love in return. The ceremony was quick, a mere formality. No grand celebrations, no heartfelt vows, just signatures, witnesses, and a judge pronouncing them husband and wife. As they stepped outside, the world around them remained unchanged, yet everything had shifted. Zara was no longer just herself. She was someone's wife, bound to a man who saw her as nothing more than a contractual obligation. Adam opened the car door for her, his gestures polite but distant. She slid inside, folding her hands in her lap as he took the driver's seat. The ride to their new home was silent, filled with unspoken thoughts and unexpressed emotions. When they arrived at the grand mansion, Zara felt a fresh wave of reality crash over her. This was her home now, yet it felt foreign, unfamiliar. Adam led her inside, showing her to a spacious bedroom, her bedroom. "You can settle in," he said. "If you need anything, let me know." Zara nodded. "Thank you." He studied her for a moment before adding, "I know this is unconventional, but I assure you, I will respect our boundaries. We'll live as agreed, separate lives under the same roof. No expectations." His words were meant to reassure her, but they only emphasized the cold reality of their arrangement. There was no warmth, no affection, just a mutual understanding of what this marriage was supposed to be. As the door closed behind him, Zara let out a long breath. She had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Little did she know, this agreement, this seemingly emotionless bond, would soon turn into something neither of them had anticipated. The first few days passed in a blur of polite exchanges and distant silence. Their conversations were limited to necessity, brief and to the point. Adam would leave early for work, and Zara would spend most of her time exploring the vast mansion, adjusting to her new life. Everything about their arrangement was carefully structured, devoid of any emotion. Yet, as much as they tried to maintain the boundaries of their contract, life had its own way of bringing people together. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled in, shaking the mansion with the force of the winds. Zara sat by the large window, watching the rain lash against the glass. The flickering lights warned of an impending power outage, and just as she had anticipated, darkness swallowed the house. She let out a shaky breath. The silence was heavy, unsettling in the vast emptiness of the mansion. Adam's voice broke through the darkness. "Are you all right?" Zara turned toward the doorway, barely making out his figure in the dim glow of the emergency lights. She hadn't expected him to check on her. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. Adam stepped forward. "You don't like storms?" She hesitated before admitting, "They remind me of a night when I got lost as a child. The power went out, and I was alone for hours. Since then, I've never liked them." Adam didn't say anything at first. Then, after a pause, he walked to the shelf, pulled out a flashlight, and handed it to her. "This should help." Zara was surprised by the small act of kindness. It wasn't grand, but it was thoughtful. She took the flashlight, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. "Thank you," she murmured. Adam simply nodded before retreating to his study. But that night, Zara found herself thinking about him more than she should have. A shift in the silence. Days passed, and something unspoken settled between them, an awareness, an undeniable shift. Zara began to notice things she hadn't before. The way Adam always ensured she had everything she needed, even without being asked. How he would pause for a moment before heading to work, as if contemplating whether to say more. How his gaze would linger when he thought she wasn't looking. One evening, she found herself in the library, flipping through books she had no intention of reading. Adam walked in, looking for a file, but stopped when he saw her. "You read?" he asked, curious. She nodded. "I used to. Haven't had much time lately." He hesitated before pulling a book from the shelf. "This one's good. I think you'll like it." Zara took it, surprised. "You've read it?" Adam nodded. "More than once." She studied the cover, then glanced back at him. "I didn't take you for someone who enjoys fiction." "There's more to people than what they show," he replied simply. His words lingered in the air, settling between them. For the first time, Zara wondered if she had misjudged him. The unspoken bond. One afternoon, Zara decided to explore the mansion's garden. It was breathtaking, rows of vibrant flowers, a stone pathway leading to a small fountain, and a serene atmosphere she hadn't expected. Lost in thought, she didn't notice Adam approaching until he spoke. "You like it here?" She turned, nodding. "It's peaceful." Adam glanced around. "My mother designed it. She believed gardens reflected the heart of a home." Zara looked at him, surprised by the rare glimpse into his past. "She must have had a beautiful heart then." A shadow crossed his features, but he didn't respond. Instead, he walked to a rose bush and plucked a flower, handing it to her. "For you," he said. Zara hesitated before taking it. "Thank you." It was just a flower, just a small gesture, but it meant something. In that moment, the distance between them felt smaller, the contract that bound them less significant. The beginning of something more. As the days turned into weeks, their interactions grew less forced, more natural. Adam would bring her coffee in the mornings without a word, and Zara would leave him a neatly organized workspace, knowing he liked things a certain way. They weren't grand gestures, but they were thoughtful, unspoken promises that neither acknowledged aloud. One night, as they sat across from each other at dinner, Zara found herself laughing at something Adam had said. It was unexpected, effortless. He looked at her, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "You should do that more often." "What?" she asked. "Laugh," he said simply. Something fluttered in her chest, something dangerous. This wasn't supposed to happen. Feelings weren't part of the contract. Yet, as she looked into Adam's eyes, she realized, this was no longer just an arrangement. It was something more. Zara had promised herself that she wouldn't feel anything. She had convinced herself that this was just an arrangement, a business deal with an expiration date. But the heart had a way of defying logic, of rewriting the rules without permission. It was in the little things, the way Adam looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, the moments of silence that spoke louder than words, the growing comfort of his presence. She could no longer ignore it. This wasn't just a contract anymore. It was something deeper, something dangerous. One evening, as Zara was setting the table for dinner, Aadam entered the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves. "I'll help." She raised an eyebrow. "You helping in the kitchen?" A small smirk appeared on his lips. "I know how to set a plate, Zara." She chuckled, passing him the cutlery. Their hands brushed for a second, sending an unexpected warmth through her. She quickly pulled back, hoping he hadn't noticed. But he had. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. It had become their new normal, these unspoken understandings, stolen glances, and moments that stretched longer than they should. Halfway through the meal, Aadam put down his fork and looked at her. "You seem different lately." Zara swallowed. "Different how?" "I don't know," he admitted. "More comfortable, maybe." She forced a small smile. "I guess I'm just getting used to this arrangement." Aadam studied her for a moment before nodding, though something in his expression told her he wasn't convinced. The fear of the truth. Zara tried to ignore the shift in her heart, but it became harder each day. The way Aadam spoke to her, how he paid attention to things she never expected him to notice, it all made her feel something she wasn't supposed to. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered into the library. The dim glow of a lamp illuminated the room, and to her surprise, Aadam was there, leaning against the couch, a book in his hands. "You're up late," he said, closing the book. "So are you," she countered, stepping closer. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Couldn't sleep." Zara hesitated before sitting on the other end of the couch. "Something on your mind?" Aadam was quiet for a moment before he finally said, "This marriage. I didn't think it would feel this real." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He turned to her, his gaze intense. "We signed an agreement, but lately, I forget that this isn't supposed to mean anything." Zara's heart pounded. She wanted to say something, to ask if he felt what she did, but fear held her back. What if she was misreading everything? What if, to him, this was still just an obligation? She forced a small laugh. "We're just getting used to each other, that's all." Aadam didn't reply. He simply nodded, though his eyes told a different story. The breaking point. As the days passed, the emotions Zara tried to suppress only grew stronger. She found herself searching for Aadam in ways she hadn't before, waiting for him to come home, looking forward to their conversations, noticing the warmth in his presence. Then, one evening, everything changed. Zara was in the garden when she heard Aadam on the phone, his voice sharp, filled with frustration. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the moment she heard her name, she froze. "This was supposed to be temporary," Aadam said, his tone firm. "I don't need anyone reminding me of that." Her chest tightened. The voice on the other end was muffled, but she could make out enough. "Then end it before it becomes something more." Zara's stomach twisted. Had she been fooling herself all along? Had she imagined the connection between them? She took a step back, but the sound of her movement made Aadam turn. Their eyes met, and in that moment she knew. He had meant for her to hear. Zara swallowed the lump in her throat. "So that's all this is to you." Her voice was quieter than she intended, but it carried the weight of her pain. Aadam exhaled sharply, rubbing his forehead. "Zara, it's not." "Don't," she interrupted, forcing herself to stay composed. "I understand now." She turned to walk away, but before she could take another step, he grabbed her wrist gently. "Wait." She hesitated, but she didn't turn back. His voice softened. "It's not as simple as it sounds." Zara closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. Then she pulled her hand free. "Maybe for you, it isn't. But for me, it is." Without another word, she walked away, leaving him standing alone under the dim garden lights. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she realized something painful. She had broken the one rule she had sworn to follow. She had fallen in love. Zara told herself she wouldn't cry. She had known from the beginning what this marriage was, a contract, an agreement with defined boundaries. But knowing something and feeling it were two different things. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the moonlight streaming through the window, her mind replaying Aadam's words over and over. This was supposed to be temporary. Then why had he made her feel otherwise? Why had he been kind in ways that weren't necessary? Why had he looked at her like she mattered? She clenched her fists, trying to bury the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Maybe she had been foolish. Maybe she had let her heart believe in something that was never real. But if that was true, why had there been pain in his eyes when she walked away? Adam's dilemma. Adam sat in his study, staring at the untouched glass of water on his desk. The silence around him was deafening. He had seen the hurt in Zara's eyes, and it unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. This marriage had started as nothing more than a means to an end, a way to fulfill obligations without complications. But somewhere along the way, it had become more. He had let his guard down. And now, he was losing her. His mind went back to their moments together, the way her laughter filled the house, the way she noticed the smallest details about him, the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling heavily. What was he doing? This wasn't supposed to happen. But it had. A love unspoken. The next morning, Zara avoided him. She stayed in her room longer than usual, ate her meals alone, and didn't respond to his attempts at conversation. Adam noticed. And he hated it. By evening, he couldn't take it anymore. He found her in the garden, sitting by the fountain, staring at the rippling water as if it held all the answers she was searching for. He stepped forward, his voice quiet. Zara. She didn't turn. You don't have to explain, Adam. I understand now. He sighed, stepping closer. Do you? Finally, she looked at him, and the sadness in her gaze nearly knocked the air from his lungs. You made it clear. This is just a contract. It was never meant to be anything more. Adam clenched his jaw. Do you really believe that? She swallowed hard. It doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what's real. He sat beside her, hesitating for only a moment before speaking. I never expected this. She didn't respond, so he continued. I never planned to feel anything. I thought we would go our separate ways when the time came, and it wouldn't matter. He paused, searching for the right words. But then you happened. Zara blinked. What? Adam turned to face her fully. You changed everything, Zara. The way you look at life, the way you make a house feel like a home, the way you see things no one else does. You made me care. Her breath caught, but she still looked hesitant. Then why did you say what you did? Adam exhaled. Because I was scared. She stared at him. Scared. He nodded. I don't know how to do this, Zara. I've spent my life making calculated decisions, avoiding emotions, keeping things simple. But you make me want more. Silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Then, Zara whispered, then why push me away? Adam reached for her hand, his touch hesitant yet firm. Because I don't deserve you. Zara felt her heart tighten. That's not your decision to make. He held her gaze. Then tell me, do you want to leave? She hesitated. She had every reason to walk away. She had been hurt, and she had promised herself she wouldn't be second to anything. But looking into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the vulnerability he had never shown before, she knew the answer. No, she whispered. I don't. Adam exhaled as if he had been holding his breath. Then stay. A love that defied the contract. From that day forward, the contract no longer defined their marriage. It wasn't about obligations or terms anymore. It was about them. Adam made an effort to show her how much she meant to him, not through grand gestures, but in the way he listened when she spoke, how he waited for her at dinner, how he reached for her hand without hesitation. And Zara let herself believe in them, in what they had built, in what they could be. One evening, as they stood by the window watching the sunset, Adam turned to her. I don't want this to end, he admitted. Zara smiled softly. It doesn't have to. Adam reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a delicate diamond ring. This time, not as a contract, he said, voice filled with emotion, but as a real promise. Marry me again, Zara. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she realized something profound. What had started as an obligation had become the greatest love story she had ever known. And this time, there were no contracts. No conditions. Only love.